Welcome to Miracles in the Madness, where faith meets the chaos. I'm your host, Ashton, and together we'll explore stories, Bible truths, and encouragement for women living in the beautiful, messy life God has called them to. Each week, we'll dive into real-life testimonies, practical encouragement, and Bible insights to help you walk faithfully through the everyday madness. Come join me. Welcome back to Miracles in the Madness. I am Ashton Keever. I'm your host, and I want to wish you, first and foremost, a Happy New Year. We have officially entered 2026, and I couldn't be more thrilled because I've gotten another year to breathe and live and grow on this planet. Which means that God is not done with me yet. And if you're here listening to this podcast, that means that you have purpose and a unique role to fill on this planet yet. So if God hasn't given up on us, then we shouldn't give up on us. And so thus, we must trudge forward in this new year. And you know what? I don't even want to trudge. I want to skip. Maybe I'll even gallop a little bit. I don't know. But I'm going into this new year with a positive attitude because I know, and if you listen to my last podcast, you know that I'm entering this year with plenty of things in my life that still don't feel like they're sorted out. I am in no way, shape, or form entering 2026 with any ideas of grandeur that the puzzle that I am currently a tiny piece in is perfectly put together. I think we still have pieces hiding in the couch cushions. Like, it's all over the place. And so I'm not going to set myself up for failure with some expectation that this year is already perfect and gleaming. And so it's about my posture. It's about my mindset. So as I said in my last episode, if you haven't listened, go back and listen to it. My word of the year is persevere, and I have every intention of doing that. And what is so incredible about the timing of these things is I watched It's a Wonderful Life. It is one of my absolute favorite holiday movies, and I say holiday movie because I really don't know that it is a Christmas movie. It almost feels a little more, it feels a little bit more New Year. It almost feels a little bit more anytime you need a little uplifting. But it is around Christmas time, and it is, so it's definitely a Christmas movie. But I am of the firm opinion it doesn't have to be watched only at Christmas. I digress. I watched It's a Wonderful Life again this year. And as always, I left that film with a renewed hope in God, in humanity, in this life that we are given. And reminded that even if it doesn't feel like we're actively making a difference, even if it doesn't seem like anything we do leads to a better outcome or anything more positive, the movie It's a Wonderful Life is such a reminder that we have one little decision that we make could impact thousands of people. I mean, I think they call it the butterfly effect. You know, maybe a butterfly flaps its wings in the far east, and the west is having a tsunami or whatever, something like that. I completely butchered it, almost undoubtedly, but you get my drift. That like something so small compounds and can make a huge impact. So if you've never seen It's a Wonderful Life, I highly encourage it. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the movie in this episode. So if you are a purist, kind of like myself, and you're like, whoa, 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 don't spoil it, you may want to stop listening around this point and come back after you've watched the movie. But there's your warning. And so here we go. Um, so the whole movie begins with God and the angels talking about George Bailey. And it all starts with us getting to see his life up into the moment where the angel has to enter the scene. And basically, we just see all of these examples of George putting other people before himself. He's doing exactly what God has called us to do, in that he loved his neighbors as himself. And sometimes it was for people that maybe he wasn't even that close to. One example that's shown is his employer, Mr. Gower, who was overwhelmed with grief, and he was the pharmacist in the area, and so he accidentally made some bad pills for a kid, and he was going to have George go deliver them, and George didn't know what to do because he knew it wasn't good. He saw the bottles and the things that went into it, and he went to go try to talk to his father. And isn't that the most beautiful? See, these are things that I didn't catch when I had watched this movie prior to um, strengthening and deepening my relationship with God. But what a beautiful picture and reminder to all of us. George knew something was wrong, and he knew he didn't have the answers for himself. And so he went searching for his father. And isn't that what we're supposed to do when we don't know what we're supposed to be doing, when we don't know which way to go, what direction to turn? And aren't we supposed to just go running to God the Father? We're supposed to run to him, and he'll have the answers. Maybe we won't get them that day. And, I don't know of many people that can hear God's voice audibly, but you will know his answer. God will always provide. And so I just think it's really beautiful that his earthly father didn't have an answer for him. And so George goes back to the pharmacy, and it just so happens when George is walking in, presumably to go talk to Mr. Gower about the situation, Mr. Gower was in the middle of a phone call from the people who are waiting on these pills, and he starts to get really angry with George. And this film was shot in a very different time frame. Business practices, everything was so different back then. So like, if you're young, especially if you're a young person watching this that doesn't have a lot of old time influence, or in my neck of the woods, it would be that kind of more country influence, whatever you want to call it, a disciplined influence in your life, it may be a little bit shocking, but he starts to hit George on his bad ear, and we see not only does his ear start to bleed, but George is just crying and trembling and scared, but he bravely, very courageously tells the truth anyway. And because Mr. Gower, I believe because Mr. Gower and George had a relationship, even though it was maybe employee-employer, Mr. Gower trusted him enough to go look into the situation, realized George was correct, and then realized that George literally just saved his entire life. Because just like today, he would have suffered some major consequences of that one mistake. His entire job, his career, his life as he knew it would have been over. But because George disobeyed him in that moment, and tried to seek the right answer, and then it saved his life too. So it's just this even more beautiful picture of how God will work it out for your good, right? So George is sitting here trembling and literally physically being beaten by this man, but he still leans in and he tells the truth and he still does what's right. And it ends up being this really beautiful thing where he's really receiving praise for having been disobedient. So that, and just that whole scene just had me on the edge of my seat. And I've seen this movie so many times, but I was just sitting there and just thinking to myself, wow, what an incredible picture for us. Thank you, writer and producers of this film. So as the film goes on, George always um, longs to get out of Bedford Falls. He wants to travel. He wants to see the world. But somehow he always, every moment that he almost leaves or even just for a vacation, he gets a small hope that he's going to get to leave. Something happens and he chooses to serve others over himself. And you just see these many times where God is still providing for him and his family. He's still blessing him. And gosh, like the people of Bedford Falls love and adore George Bailey. But George is just feeling so run down by life that he's feeling like he doesn't have anyone who he can rely on. And it just, you see him start to spiral, right? And when it seems like he's finally reached like a good spot, he's finally overcome some of these valleys. He's kind of on top of that mountaintop. The antagonist in the film, Mr. Potter, he tends to be, well, not tends to, he is a mean, old, rich man. And you can tell he does a lot of wheeling and dealing. And there's a mix-up, and some of the money that, well, almost, I think it was all of the money that George and his uncle were depositing on behalf of their bank and to keep their accounts and everything straight. There was just a mix-up, and Mr. Potter ended up with it, and it was lost. Mr. Potter, instead of doing the right thing, just holds on to it and tries to get George to come to him begging for money. He tries to get George arrested, and he almost succeeds. So at that moment, George feels that he is hopeless. He even makes the comment, "I'm worth more dead than I am alive." And that is how you know he's at rock bottom. Have you ever felt a little bit like that? Maybe not literally feeling so hopeless that you want to die. But have you ever felt like you really were at the bottom of the barrel? Like that you had just hit rock bottom? Or maybe you were between, in to just continue using idioms or adages, maybe you were between a rock and a hard place. Maybe there was just no correct answer. Maybe there was just no right way to go. Both answers sucked. George doesn't immediately turn to praying to God. He doesn't immediately do that. In fact, he tries to run away. First, he lashes out in anger to everyone around him, his children and his family especially so. And, they say hurt people hurt people. And his example is a little bit smaller in that, like, it was more of a localized hurt, right? But it's just another really small but great example of how we see people hurting others who have lived a life of pain and sorrow. So anyway, George is standing at the edge of a bridge considering killing himself because for his family at that time, he saw no other way to make sure he got that money to protect his family. Because if he didn't and he was sent to jail, his family would then be like destitute. He would not be able to provide for his family, and thus, what would happen to his family? Times were very different back then, and a woman like his wife would not be able to work full time and care for, I think they had 8 kids, or they had a lot of children, especially at this point in the movie. And so it would just, I don't know what would happen to her, but it wouldn't be great. And so that's what was running through his mind. And he's about to jump off this bridge. And at that moment, the moment right before he's about to totally give up, is when he calls upon God's name. And so we're kind of, this third party audience where we've seen the angels talking, we've seen everything up until this point. So we know God is sending him his guardian angel, Clarence. And Clarence shows up on the scene in the form of literally falling into the waters below of the bridge. So George is no longer jumping to kill himself, he's jumping to save Clarence. And Clarence is an odd duck, and they have this little adventure because George sits there and is discussing with Clarence how he wishes he'd never been born, because then this never would have happened. But in fact, if George had never been born, we, just as the audience, had watched several scenes of how, well, if George wasn't there to fix the problem, what would have happened? And the angel shows him exactly what would have happened. And George at first doesn't believe him that he's an angel or that he's granted his wish, but he meets several of his friends from Bedford Falls who don't even know who he is because he's never been born. So his name doesn't exist. He's not a real person. And anyway, he finds that it's too scary. It's a terrible life. He doesn't want to live the life. He doesn't want to see his friends and family living the life that they're living because of his non-existence. And he goes into prayer again, saying, I want to live again. I want to live again. And sure enough, his wish is granted. He goes running home. And as soon as he gets home, his wife, Mary, has been doing a lot of work in the background to make up for whatever is going wrong, right? And as he arrives home, they bring out this big basket, and every person that you see in the movie leading up to this point, and then some, show up to help George in his time of need. And there's no clear answer as to how much money the family and friends bring back to George, but he owes something like $8,000. And by today's standards, that doesn't sound that crazy. It's like, who would kill themselves over $8,000? But $8,000 in that time, we're talking, that was when they were building houses for $5,000. So I'm not going to try to give you an exact number, but if you think about it by today's standards, if a spec house on a lot wherever you live, I don't know where I live, it could be anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 for that house, but we'll go middle of the road, say $300,000. We're talking maybe $500,000 or more that he has lost. And being in the banking business, there's a lot of questions that go along with that, which kind of, anyway, it doesn't matter. My point being, he went from being so hopeless to sitting behind a table as all of these people give so cheerfully to keep his family safe and to take care of him in his time of need. And it was just, oh man, I cried again watching it, because people often think that are in that hopeless place. They often think nobody will even notice when I'm gone, or no one will come to my funeral, or everyone would be better off without me. And that is a lie that the enemy is telling you. And George got to see it firsthand. And so I guess the lessons I think we can pull from this movie, there's several. But number one, don't wait until you've hit the bottom to reach out and run to your Father. Have a constant conversation with him. God's not always going to tell you in your ear what is the right answer, or give you the perfect next step, or answer your prayer. But it's the relationship that matters. The more you trust God, the less you care about getting the exact answer. So, number one is definitely be in conversation with your Father. Be prepared to hear from him, and be prepared to act on whatever he is telling you to do. I imagine if George had reached out to God a little bit sooner and been in regular conversation with him, he would have known if he just waited, all would be revealed. He would have known that everything was going to be okay, that he wasn't going to go to jail, and he could have trusted God to handle that. I think another lesson we can learn from this movie is that our friends and family love us more than we could ever know. So when we try to do it on our own, when we try to take care of everything ourselves, sometimes we're doing a disservice to our friends and family who just want to love on us and support us. Someone once told me, don't rob your neighbor of the blessing. So, in the time that they told me that, I was struggling, and I said, well, that person wouldn't want to do that. They've really been struggling with their health lately, or they've been really struggling to just make ends meet or whatever. And the person told me, don't rob another person of their blessing, because I don't know if I don't ask. And if I don't ask, I'm not even allowing them the opportunity to say yes, right? So in that same way, we can't take that opportunity from our friends and family, because there are people in our lives who are just waiting for the perfect opportunity to swoop in and be our superhero. And it's because that's what God's wanting them to do. I mean, haven't you heard those stories of people who they had $50 in their pocket, and they were walking down the street and they saw this random person. They said, this is so weird, but I think I'm just supposed to give you $50. And it turns out that person needed like $50 for whatever their bill was, or whatever. This is a terrible, very generic example, but I hope you understand what I'm saying, in that God has his hands in, on, and around everything in our lives. So for us to assume that we have to figure it all out on our own is absolutely crazy, especially when we know God and we know that he sent his only son for us. I don't think there is any other expression of love that could be any clearer of how much he loves us. That's a sacrifice that I can't imagine making personally. Every time I read the story of Abraham and Isaac, I start to cry, because I don't know how I would ever, with such conviction, just, all right, son, let's go kill you today. Are you kidding? No. I could never. I can't imagine. And I know Abraham's faith must have been absolutely astronomically out of this world big to know and trust that God was not going to make him kill his son or that God would provide. He had to have had such conviction of that. Now, I don't know. I look at books, for example, where, it's a series of books, but maybe you haven't read them until there's already like, say, 8 books out. Well, that first book, maybe it looks pretty bleak for one of the main characters, but the likelihood of that main character being killed in the first book when there's 8 is pretty small. So maybe that's the way that Abraham saw it. He said, I don't know. All I know is Isaac is my only son, and God said he was going to build for me, or from me would become a nation more numerous than the stars. And so his trust in God had to have been so deep that he saw it as if there were already 8 books written. He's only in the first. So he's like, I ain't got to worry. From Isaac has to come the rest of my family. So God's got a plan. I'm just going to trust what he's saying to do. Anyway, that was a little bit of a side quest tangent, but gosh, we are supposed to be like Jesus and like God to our neighbors, to our brothers and sisters. And when we think about what does it mean to be like God, to be like Christ to our neighbors, it certainly doesn't mean never being ready to help. It certainly doesn't mean not showing love. But if someone doesn't afford us the opportunity to show up for them in that way, maybe it would be pretty hard to see God in this broken world. So in the same way, if you don't allow other people to show up for you, it might be a little harder for you to tend your relationship with God, because it may feel a little bit like you can't see him or feel him on this world. Well, honey bear, maybe let people show up for you a little bit. Let God show off through your friends. It's pretty amazing. I also think there's something to be said. We'll call it number 3. The example of God communing with the angels and talking about George and how they were going to protect him. I don't know that that's really how it goes. But isn't it a really lovely thought to think about God up there, and because he knows your full story, he's already several steps ahead, planning for your guardian angel to be ready and able to protect you and guard you and keep you safe in the moments you need them the most. I just think, man, if we really thought about this a little bit more often, what would we have to be afraid of on this earth? Nothing could be more scary than not knowing that there's hope and that there's a God and that we have guardian angels, that we are so important to God that he would give up what I believe to be his most precious possession or his most precious son, right? His only son. And if you want to think about it that way, with Jesus being God, he gave up his own life. It's so hard to conceptualize that, but what do we have to be afraid of if God is all powerful, all knowing, and all present. I don't think there's much. I guess the last piece for me is that often God's way of showing up is not the way that we expect. George fully expected that the only way he could get the money he needed was going to be by his own death. But it's because he only could see it through a human lens. God knew that people would be more than willing to jump at the chance to support George. And they would show up the minute he needed something. But he wasn't willing to ask for it. But Mary was. God always has a plan. And while we may not always see how we're going to get from point A to point B, all he asks us to do is show up in obedience. So if you're sitting there and you're wondering how in the world you are going to ever survive raising your children, if you're sitting there wondering how you're going to make ends meet this month, hold on to your horses, because I can't tell you how many times I hear of people who are fully trusting in God, who just they'll say things like, I don't even know how it happened, but I needed $1,250 to pay a medical bill this month, and it just showed up in the mail. I just got a random check for blah blah blah, exactly the amount of money I needed, and it was just so random. I could never no, it wasn't random. It was God. And he was showing up, and maybe he was showing up through a friend who knew you and knew you needed the money. I'm not sure. All I'm saying is, go watch It's a Wonderful Life. Because I just made an entire episode about it because it's just so beautiful. And I've left that movie with so much hope and inspiration, and I think I might make a regular practice of it throughout the year to watch that movie and just be reminded of the beautiful gift of life that has its ups and downs. And just the reminder that God is literally always present and watching and working it all out for my good. If you want to talk about miracles, that movie has plenty in it. This is kind of a weird sidebar episode, but I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you go and watch the movie, and I hope that you will share with me how you felt about it. I really would love to hear your reactions to it if you've never seen the movie. And I hope that if nothing else, this episode inspires you to continue to look for those little moments of every single day. My grandma used to always say, count your blessings. And it's true. Every single day, if you're having a particularly rough time and you're having a really hard time seeing the good every single day, spend time before bed every night writing down at least 5 things that you're grateful for. And I think you'll notice that when you count those blessings and you count those things that you know were gifts from God, even if they were very small, you will start to recognize more of where he's showing up in your life, and you'll spend more time communicating with him every single minute of the day. In the meantime, don't forget to keep looking for the miracles in the madness. So this is probably my last episode of this kind of holiday mini series. I will pick back up in February But don't forget to keep looking out for some resources and guides along the way. I actually just released my newest resource called New Year Saying God, and it's about choosing a word of the year with God close by, and I hope that it inspires you this year that it's not about pressure, it's not about New Year's resolutions, it's about finding God in all of the things happening in your life. If you want to get your copy, you can find it on my website, ashtonkiever.com/shop. And if you want to get it for free, you can subscribe to my email list, and I will send you a code to get 100% off on my shop. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that you have the best new year. Thank you for listening to Miracles in the Madness. I hope today's episode encouraged you and reminded you that even in the chaos, God is faithful. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who might need encouragement. You can also visit my blog at ashtonkiever.com for more stories, scripture, and resources to help you walk in faith every single day.